Yeah. Perfect. You can see my screen now. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So today is the launching of the second phase of the community of practice of the CLIMAAX project. And we have a high number of participants, so we're really happy and welcome. Just a brief housekeeping rules. So please know that the meeting, this meeting is recorded. You won't have the chance to open your mic or the camera, but it's also recording will be accessible later on. So don't worry if you miss something. We will gather some inputs from you through Mentimeter. But also, you're also more than welcome to use the Q&A box. You should have the button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And just a quick disclaimer for those of you who have applied to the CLIMAAX Cascading Funds. This meeting has nothing to do with the outcome of the evaluation process. So your attendance won't affect the evaluation, but we hope that nevertheless, however the outcome goes, you will join us and you will keep being active in this community. So the agenda for today is, of course, the beginning, welcome and housekeeping. Then we will have a short introduction and overview of the CLIMAAX project by the project coordinator, Frederik Sperna-Weiland from Deltares. Then we will have an overview of the community of practice with Fulvio Bidao from CMCC. And after that, we will have a short opportunity to gather inputs and your expectations and preference. What would you like to this community to be shaped and with Menti? And after that, we will have an interactive panel session moderated by Anna Pirani and Jeremy Pal from CMCC. And we will close with another feedback collection loop and some closing remarks. So again, for whoever joined late, you don't have the opportunity to open your mic, but you're open to use the Q&A box. So don't be shy. And without further ado, I leave the floor to the project coordinator, Frederik, to give an overview of the CLIMAAX project. So the floor is yours, Frederik.
Thank you, Gloria. And great to see that there is such an interest in the launch and the community of practice of the CLIMAAX project. So I'll give a brief introduction on the project, as many of you may already know that, and we will discuss more detail later today. So Deltares is leading the CLIMAAX project, and the project aims to increase the climate resilience of European regions. And to this end, we have developed a first version of a climate risk assessment framework and toolbox, which are currently online. And these are to be applied by European regions. Good to mention that CLIMAAX is part and financed by the EU Mission on Adaptation. And with that, we also share the same interest and focus by building the resilience capacity of European regions. By the outcomes of our projects and the applications of climate risk assessment in many European regions, we aim for a harmonization and consolidation of the practices in climate risk assessment to also make intercomparisons between European regions. The project started January last year. We are now nearly at the end of our second year, and many tools have been developed and are now starting to be applied by the European regions. And there are 2 more years to go. Well, key to the CLIMAAX developments that have been made is the climate risk assessment framework developed by CMCC and YASA, which can really guide you step by step through a climate risk assessment for your own region. To support that climate risk assessment framework, there is also the toolbox available now, so the handbook of CLIMAAX, where you can run workflows for different climate hazards for your own region by simple adjustments of those workflows. We've tested those workflows in the first years with 5 European regions. I see that our region, Chilena, and Catalonia are now also here, and we did it quite interactive. So we really wanted to develop something that is applicable more at the regional and local level. And I think the scientists learned really a lot from the regions, and also the other way around, we learned from each other. And that helped us to, well, at least have an improved handbook and framework available now to all European regions. You're most likely aware that CLIMAAX is also a cascading fund project. So we do not only fund the consortium, but there is a large amount of money available to support regions for doing their own climate risk assessments. And you may or may have not applied for the first or second CLIMAAX open call. The first batch of FSTP projects has started. There is a lot of guidance material online and hosted by ECMWF. There is also the online help desk in case you have questions. It's mainly focusing on the funded regions, but for simple questions, we also have time available to support anyone who wants to use the tools or the framework. Well, in the next 2 years, we hope to learn a lot from the regional applications, and we will think about how we can upscale the results and the tools. And this is also important feedback that we will provide back to the European Union. So in that sense, anyone who is using the tools and asking questions or providing feedback is also helping us a lot. Okay, in brief, that was CLIMAAX.
Thank you so much, Frederick, for the overview. And now we are going to talk about the CLIMAAX Community of Practice. So I welcome on board Fulvio Bidao for an introduction and the overview of the first phases and then the upcoming phases of this Community of Practice. Fulvio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gloria, and thank you, Frederick, for the nice overview of the project. I have here the honor to introduce the CLIMAAX Community of Practice, or COP, which is a central space for collaboration and knowledge exchange between practitioners across regions and sectors. So its primary goal is mainly to foster learning across diverse knowledge communities and networks, aiming to co-design and improve the CRA practice or climate risk assessment practice at local and regional levels. Gloria, please. Thank you. And to this end, the community of practice is established as a way to bring together, mobilize, and engage a community of interested practitioners through a series of online and in-presence events and activities that can support mutually beneficial learning and the development and strengthening of capacities by both sharing knowledge, resources, and promoting peer review and peer advice around climate risk assessment, while contributing to the refinement and further update of the CLIMAAX framework and toolbox. So moving forward to discuss the composition of the CLIMAAX Community of Practice, initially the Community of Practice started with scientific and regional organization to foster internal mutual learning within the project and co-design its main outcomes. These include pilot regions from CLIMAAX and other EU institutions like the Joint Research Center, the European Environment Agency, and other experts from international organizations and the EU Mission Adaptation Sister projects such as Pathway to Resilience. As we move forward in the next phase, we aim to expand this community by engaging new members, creating new connections, and also an online space for learning and capacity development. And our plan is to involve applicants for cascading funds, but also other regions interested and looking to improve climate risk assessment practices. And we'll also bring in knowledge from further sister projects and research and knowledge networks, including the EU Mission Implementation Platform Meet for Adapt and its community of practice, but also even broader alliances of local governments and stakeholders like insurance networks and land use planners, while welcoming spontaneous inquiries from people and organizations that are interested in becoming part of this community. And here it's important to note that the community of practice is open and flexible because there are no strict boundaries and engagement can vary based on members' interests and activities. Next, please. So moving forward and discussing what may be the most important benefits of joining the CLIMAAX community of practice. First of all, the participants can have the chance to share insights and learn directly from the experience of fellow practitioners, while also receiving advice and support from a network of peers. And the expertise within the community will contribute also to shape CLIMAAX activities, as already presented briefly by Frederick, and the outcomes by contributing to the refinement of its framework and the toolbox. And beyond that, the community of practice can offer the opportunity to connect with regions, leveraging their experiences of success, but also the challenges for the mutual growth of the community, and also collaborate with peers in areas of shared interest and work on specific applications or proposals jointly. And lastly, but not least, participants will have access to a set of webinars, workshops, and events that are organized throughout the CLIMAAX project and that might be tailored to their professional needs. But as we reflect on CLIMAAX and the community of practice journey so far, it's important to mention the activities that have shaped our community and have informed our work. And one of the foundational activities has been a comprehensive survey that was designed to capture the current state of climate risk assessment across regions in Europe. And with this survey, we engaged practitioners directly involved in weather and climate-related risk assessment to gather their insights, which played a crucial role in designing the CLIMAAX risk assessment framework, developing practical guidance that must be tailored to the needs of local applications. Next, please, Gloria. And this is just to remind that the survey is still open, and you can see here a QR code, and we encourage you to scan the code and participate in the survey if you haven't already, because this marked the beginning of our efforts to build the CLIMAAX community of practice, and the input of everyone is welcome, as we will use this feedback for continuously refine and update the CLIMAAX framework. So moving forward, while we develop this framework using this survey with different kinds of organization, we conducted also an external consultation on an intermediate draft with pilot regions and other experts to refine the framework, and their feedback significantly shaped the framework, ensuring that it's clear, but also usable and flexible enough to meet the diverse needs of regions and local communities. And this iterative process, combining survey and consultation, has been really key in making the framework both theoretically sound, but also practically applicable. In addition to survey and consultation, Gloria, next please. We have hosted a set of webinars with pilot regions to present how the framework works in practice and to share the preliminary results from the risk assessment. You can find all these events in the web page of CLIMAAX under this section events, but also on YouTube. And furthermore, we launched a series of content and technical sessions featuring the CLIMAAX digital handbook to guide the users through the main elements and workflows of climate risk assessment. And we also held info days and webinars for open calls to support applicants navigating the process of applying for cascading funds and for using the digital handbook. So looking ahead for the future activity, there are several key activities we are currently planning for the community of practice. We are planning thematic webinars and workshops to promote discussion on important topics between regions, scientific experts, and other stakeholders, but also continuously using surveys and consultation to gather feedback on current practices and refine our outcomes for greater practicality and usability. And also we are planning to use or to set up a dedicated online space for knowledge sharing and peer collaboration where members can exchange insights and best practices, for example, but also capacity building and peer-to-peer learning activities to help regions develop the skills and understand the outcomes from CLIMAAX to effectively apply the climate risk assessment framework. And lastly, there are a set of further activities that must be decided with your support and input, like we are including here, just for examples, a special journal issue or hackathons that we need to develop with your input to meet the community's evolving needs and priority. And this is just a tentative plan as we would like to tailor the activities to align them with your expectation and priorities. So now we'd love to hear your thoughts on these ideas and what's most relevant to you. And with that in mind, I now pass it back to Gloria for a Mentimeter poll to gather your input. Thank you.
Thank you, Fulvio, so much for the overview. And yeah, as Fulvio mentioned, now we would like to gather feedback from you. So get your smartphone and go to www.menti.com and enter the code that you see on the screen, or alternatively, even more easy, just scan the QR code. So why we are doing this is not only to keep your attention up and to make this moment more interactive, but also that we are really interested in having a community of practice that actually reflects what you want and what is best according to your needs. We don't want to give a top-down activities that you find boring or not interesting, because it should be addressed for you. So I see now some people have already joined. I will wait just a couple more seconds. But let's dive to the first question. You can join at any moment using the QR code or the instruction that you see on top of the of the slides. So which country are you joining from? Well, we have a lot of people from Greece, Italy, Turkey, Finland. We have a code and Hungary, Denmark. Perfect. So a good representation of Europe. So, oh, we have Germany. Perfect. Serbia, Austria. Portugal is really highly represented, and Greece. And okay, so seems we are breaking the ice. So that's great. Also, Albania is highly represented. That's good. Spain. And let's dive to the next. So what are the major hazards impacting your region? You can tell up to 3 major hazards, and so we will see them appear similarly. Okay, so in Turkey, there are a lot of floods and landslides. Heat waves. I mean, we have seen now, like the recent, the last weeks, the tragic events in Spain, and for sure, it's and we also by the way, they have also impacted Emilia-Romagna region in Italy and previously Austria. So we are really seeing an increase of extreme events. So floods, as expected, it's has a major role, but also droughts and heat waves we see. Fires, flash floods, landslides, urban heat, extreme rainfall, forest fires. So basically, the idea of the CLIMAAX project is to provide a toolbox that helps you to address and to produce a climate risk assessment for your region for most of these hazards. So hopefully it will be useful for you. And yeah, the community of practice is really trying to leverage cooperation and communication in order to exploit synergies between different regions and the project to help prepare and build resilience in your region. So as well, we see heat waves, droughts, and floods are the major hazards. And I mean, it's not that we are happy to see that, but we have workflows in our toolbox that specifically address these issues. So for most of you, then hopefully the CLIMAAX project will be useful. So next question is, how would you like to engage in the community of practice? So how much would you like to participate in working groups and sharing resources and best practices? Other contributing to collaborative projects and proposals, attending webinars and discussions, peer-to-peer mentorship or advice, and also, are you interested in some scientific publication? So either writing articles or book chapters. So we see that for now, the most interested is about sharing resources and best practices. So would appear the collaboration and discussion would be really important. Second, participating into working groups and contributing to collaborative projects or proposals. So that's good. While a little bit less interest is in attending webinars and discussions. So from what I can see here is more less one-way frontal events, but more collaborative and interactive. So hopefully, like what will come next with the interactive session would be a glimpse of what this community can be. So that's a good overview. So thanks for sharing. We will try our best to build and construct a community of practice that best responds to these needs. And then what do you hope to gain from this community? So we really kept it open. So why are you here? What do you hope to gain from these? We are curious to know. Learn and progress from the CLIMAAX project, best practices, for sure. Knowledge about climate risk assessment methodologies. Oh, data, that's also really important. We had the survey, for example, from Fulvio that he mentioned before. We were asking specifically about where participants were retrieving their data. So it's for sure will be important to have a dedicated moment. General interest. Support and peer learning, best practices. Great. We will collect all these answers and try to build the COP according to this. So thanks for sharing. Next, what are specifically on challenges? So we are interested in understanding what are the challenges that you face when performing your climate risk assessment. We have proposed some. So for example, data is among them. So you can choose as many as like all the ones that apply. But also if you feel that there are more there are other challenges that we didn't include here, you're more than welcome to include them in the chat so we can better understand what are the issues and how we can best support you. So it seems that limited resources in time and budget is the biggest challenge, but also data has a big role, as well as the integration of climate risk assessment in decision making. So in the planning phase. So that's interesting. So well, hopefully, like for some regions, for the applicants and the ones that will receive the cascading fund, we can address the aspect of the limited resources, but also for the ones who will not be awarded with the cascading funds, we are actually hoping to support you with maybe other aspects such as the data and how to better implement climate risk assessment in decision making and planning and adaptation. So again, if you have, if there are any other inputs that you feel are valuable, please insert them in the chat. I will see. Okay, so we have a question. So could you please define political buy-in more precisely? So it's basically the political support, how much the government is supporting you and in performing your task on climate risk assessment, and also using them and integrating them in the planning part. Thanks for asking it. I'm sure it will be useful for other in the audience. Thank you. And yeah, so thank you so much for everyone who participated and responded. So I will now leave the floor for the panel discussion. So we will have an interactive session moderated by Anna Pirani and Jeremy Powell from CMCC. And we have two of our pilot regions to answer the question. You're free also to use the Q&A box. But first, a brief introduction of the climate risk assessment framework produced by the CLIMAAX project, and Anna Pirani will introduce you and guide you through this framework. Thank you, Anna. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gloria. It's very nice to see you all here, so numerous. So welcome to our first major event of the Community of Practice. So we start off describing a little bit one of the two main products of the CLIMAAX project, and we have the framework. In addition, as you've heard, there is a toolbox that's been developed alongside, and we'll be coming back to the toolbox in other events. So a really fast introduction. You probably already have seen this very nice graphic, which gives the main idea of the framework. It's showing you that there are 5 key steps that we envisage are important when undertaking a climate risk assessment. You can see that it's a cyclical process, so it's an iterative process. It's important to have the steps at the end where there is monitoring and evaluation, and you would imagine that there is climate risk management practices coming into play. And when you're called upon, shall we say, to reassess your climate risk, then you would see the effectiveness of these measures and hopefully see improvements, but you would also see new risks emerging. We know that climate change is a transient process, and obviously there are other factors at play that continuously evolve in driving risk. So the way we develop this framework, it comes from a very comprehensive assessment or review of what we see in the state-of-the-art literature, what we see in current practices, what's used in international assessments, for example, the IPCC, and also the ISO standards. And we've consulted also with practice. So we've reached out to across Europe to regions. We've worked very closely to pilot regions to understand what is actually happening in practice. And really critical in this project has been the very detailed consultation and review with our pilot regions. So it's really enriching to have close collaboration as we develop the substance, shall we say, of the tools of the project. And we've also gone out to some key actors in the European context, such as the European Environment Agency, JRC, Technalia. We ask for their feedback in the development of this framework. And in this consultation, but also for guiding, shall we say, the application of the framework, we've developed a very comprehensive set of guiding questions to understand what are we talking about at each of these 5 steps, and what are we talking about in the framing of the whole, shall we say, cycle of this process. Obviously, we can never be comprehensive. So there's a starting point, which then obviously needs tailoring because everybody's context is quite different in practice. So if we move to the next slide. Just to emphasize that we've been building on the state of the art. So the main aim of having a framework and not only undertaking a calculation of damages and assessing risk is to have an improved coherence of practices across countries and regions. And this is really a driving ambition of mission adaptation, to be able to have more of an aggregated process as we raise our capacity to address climate risk across Europe. And we've been trying to deal with avoiding so many layers of complexity. We have a lot of contextual, shall we say, drivers of an assessment of climate risk. And we try and develop a framework which gives guidance, but doesn't overburden on the complexity. We're trying to enhance now the practical implementation of climate risk assessment. So a framework gives the guidance, shall we say, of undertaking a risk assessment. And I think it's very important to see that the framework goes beyond a climate risk assessment into assessing key risks. And the core, shall we say, a core principle of CLIMAAX in general, including the development of the toolbox, is to have a system which is flexible and scalable, and it's adaptive to your own respective working needs. In this figure, you see many frameworks available in the literature. These come from various important publications in the last 4 or 5 years. And we try and give a clarity that can be then implemented in regions across Europe. So we build on these latest developments, and we try and move beyond traditional climate risk assessment or assessment of vulnerability and impacts. We're trying to encourage a broader assessment of a multi-hazard risk. We want to address climate change and uncertainties in a more robust and comprehensive way. And another characteristic is to build in more aspects related to the social dimensions of climate change. So, you know, it's obviously affecting communities and people and sectors in very diverse ways, with vulnerability being, you know, it's a non-homogeneous landscape. And so bringing in social dimensions such as social justice, equity, and plurality are a really important aspect of this framework. Another slide, please. So just to scale back the schematic, I wanted to highlight 3 core pillars of how the framework is built. And the first one is a set of key principles. And this is where we are really emphasizing these social dimensions of climate risk, we are trying to emphasize broadening the scoping phase of how you are undertaking a climate risk assessment to develop shared objectives, participation, involving the key stakeholders and vulnerable communities and sectors in your context, and strengthening the development of climate risk ownership. So when then this information feeds into climate risk management, the concept of risk ownership is really critical for effective implementation. And then the next part, or should we say half of this semicircle, is about technical choices. So there's a great deal of technical aspects to the assessment of risk. And here we try to promote state-of-the-art best practices, for example, in relation to how we treat uncertainties, or when we try and integrate the possible risk due to future climate changes and changing hazards and so on. The next final part is really at the core, and it's not like one comes after the other. Really, it's an integrative circular framework. We have participatory processes, and this would happen at all stages of the process. It's important, as I said before, in moving from a climate risk assessment to the management and the integration of policy development of the information that you're developing from the climate risk assessment. So engaging key groups like stakeholders, priority groups that may have a particular vulnerability, and also experts throughout the process is really important. And we'll come back to that in the panel discussion. And then the final slide, not to overwhelm you with a very complex but beautiful schematic. What we try and show here is the operational steps. What does it mean in practice when you see these 5 central steps? These unpack or unfurl into various concrete steps that are designed to move from a conceptual framing to the implementation. And this is where I mentioned earlier these guiding questions. For each of these subsections, you can find in our guidance material questions that are aimed at developing the thinking around each step. And so you see here a very structured approach to help join into this framework. And the framework is really something which is designed to be customizable and flexible and related to your own context. So you may come in at a certain point, or depending on how you've undertaken climate risk assessment so far in your work, you may be interested in exploring new dimensions of what we propose through this framework. You may have particular emphasis on certain aspects, of course. So the framework is designed to be flexible, but to give us a level starting field or playing field to everybody. And it enhances this collaboration, cooperation, and learning across European regions and communities. So I think that's it to describe the framework. And I think now I hand over to Jeremy, who's going to introduce the panel.
Thank you, Anna, for presenting the framework. As both you and Frederick highlighted, the framework was developed through a co-creation process with the CLIMAAX pilots that worked to leverage their on-the-ground climate risk assessment experiences. Today, we're bringing together representatives from 2 of the CLIMAAX pilots to join us in a discussion of some of these experiences. But before we go on, we'd like to remind you to type your questions in the Q&A box for our guests, for us to answer, and not in the chat in this case. And with some of these questions we'll answer live, and some we might take take by our panelists today. So now I have the pleasure to introduce our distinguished guests. First, we have Ainara Casajos Valles, who is part of the CLIMAAX Catalonia pilot. Ainara has been working since 2003 as a technician at the Directorate General of the Civil Protection Directorate General in the Ministry of Home Affairs and Public Safety in the regional government of Catalonia. And prior to joining the Directorate General, she worked for the European Commission in the Directorate General for the European Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid Operations, what we call DJ ECHO. She also worked for the European Commission at the Joint Research Center, JRC. She also has worked as a consultant disaster risk analysis and planning at the European and subnational levels. Yeah. Thank you, Ainara, for joining this community discussion today. We also have Michal Charnay, who belongs to the CLIMAAX pilot in Žilina, Slovakia. Okay. For the past 3 years, he's been part of Innovia Innovation Center, where he supports and constructs innovation structures and processes in the Žilina municipality. His background is in applied information technology, university teaching, and project management, and he specializes in research transfer, public governance, and twin transition. Thank you, Michal, for joining us today. So let's start with Michal. Michal, both of you and Ainara, as well as the other CLIMAAX pilots, played an important role in developing the CLIMAAX framework by leveraging your previous experiences with the climate risk assessments. We, of course, realized that the framework wasn't fully developed when you performed your assessments, but can you reflect on some of the framework steps that Anna presented, ideally using a specific example or two? Over to you, Michal. We're having problems with your audio, Michal.
Is it better now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this forum. When preparing the answer to this question, I made a bit of reflection, and I realized that to say something about the framework and how we used it within the CLIMAAX project, we should realize that there is a significant difference between two types of communities. Either the community or the municipality is aware of the climate risks or is not aware of the risks, or is not aware enough of the risks, I would say. And we are the case where the Žilina city has been aware of the risks, which means that some work on the identification of the risks has been done prior to the project. So in the phase of building the framework, we did not feel the necessity to go through all the stages because some of the questions were already decided. However, I feel that for those who are not aware enough, doing this first iteration for this, the framework is useful. And also for us, in our position, as Anna said, the climate is being developed or is developing. And in the future years, it may happen that there will be other risks gaining importance for our city as well. And then, of course, the framework is a useful tool which we can use to judge how much the new risks can be important for us. I would also add that we did anyway. We did some short prioritization, and we had about 7 different risks in the consideration. However, the 2 chosen at the beginning were the winners, and the other 5 stay under the line and may be used in the future. Is that correct for you?
Yeah, no, that gives a very nice first cut, shall we say, impression to participants. And I wanted to remind everyone that you're really welcome to ask questions to us from CLIMAAX in general, including Michal and Ainara. I think we can continue to respond to your questions as we discuss. In fact, I just want to say we had 2 very important questions in the Q&A. One of them I typed an answer for, and it was a question of what do we mean by risk ownership. And then there's also a question which I think Fulvio seems to be replying to, but it's about what do we mean by scoping. And maybe, well, risk ownership, I suppose, fits within the scoping step of the framework. So scoping would be to really assess together collectively in your context with the various stakeholders and key shall we say, participants or affected groups discuss what the objectives are of the climate risk assessment that will be undertaken. And we think that, setting out clear objectives, as identifying the key stakeholders, and sort of scoping the process before even entering an assessment is very, very helpful, particularly when thinking about where the information will land at the end. So to make it as policy relevant as possible and usable as possible in the outcome. And in defining the risk ownership, it's really to identify the key agencies or entities that have the responsibility in your governance system to assess and manage and monitor risks. And we think, I mean, maybe Michal and Ara will comment, but we think, with the increasing complexity of climate-related risks, this interplay of different stakeholders, different sectors, different agencies, administrative agencies is becoming more complex. So really establishing, in a way, a mini community of practice, which I think a lot of pilots do already or have done in the process, is really helpful before you even get along to undertaking the risk assessment. So and I don't know if there are any other questions coming in, but please feel free. And if this didn't answer your question, just chat. This is a very informal discussion. But in the meantime, I go back to Ainara now, and really picking up on this business of participation and ownership. It's a perfect segue to what we wanted to find out from you. It was, I think, important maybe to share with others how you actually identified and engaged the key groups in your process. So that specific sub-step, shall we say, of the scoping process, and then working throughout in this participatory manner. Like, what is your experience there?
Yeah, thank you, Anna, and thank you for the rest of the GMCT for inviting us, also the Catalan project, pilot, sorry. Well, I have to say that in our territory, I mean, the civil protection system is a whole system. So I think it's very well aligned to what you were saying. I mean, it includes different institutions and organizations and stakeholders at different administrative levels. I mean, which includes both local and regional levels. I mean, I am part of the Directorate General of Civil Protection in the regional government, but this, let's say, that this is one of the institutions that is part of this system. So as we understand, all these groups, they take part in reducing disaster risk, and we consider the study of risk one of those activities, let's say. Even we also have a law. I mean, there's a legal framework that also states that in our case, citizens, they have the right to be informed about the risk, but also to participate in the elaboration of plans, for example. I mean, following some guidelines, of course, and regulations. So that means that our civil protection plans, which contain an analysis of risk and hazards, and all the general protocols for collaboration among all these different groups that they take part in the system, they are developed in cooperation. I mean, we don't do it alone. So that's why we usually do it in what we call like working groups. So here you can find, it depends a lot on the topic, which is analyzed, let's say, and it's going to be addressed. But you can find, I don't know, agencies dealing with water management, let's say, or dealing with the weather, but also institutions more, let's say, forest management, but also dealing with health in general. Because first of all, these institutions, they collect their own data. Let's say they also have their own competences, and they provide us with that knowledge that we need to study the risk. And also in those working groups, we have institutions or sectors, let's say, that they can be, maybe they are exposed or they are vulnerable. And so it's necessary that they are also engaged in the process. And somehow, maybe because you also, I think you make reference in the framework to vulnerable groups, I have to say that here, through certain sectors and also some associations, I think is how generally we try to engage them, at least at regional level. I know at local level, probably they have other practices. And I mean, since some years ago, let's say that we are trying to be more explicit, let's say, on how we engage vulnerable groups. This is a bit of an ongoing task, but they are mentioned in the plans that we have, and they are certain groups. They are also considered in, in the different activities that are mentioned in the planning. That can be like, I don't know. Campaigns for information, or also when drills or exercises, they are carried out. But I would say that in general, at least in the DG I am part of, we frequently work with other institutions and organizations. I mean, I think it's a common practice, and we even did it. I think it's very interesting that you also, Anna, said that it's good that this exists. For example, in our case, even before taking part of CLIMAAX, when we decided we were going to participate in the project, we kind of built very small, let's say, not compared to these big working groups, but very small communities of practice with few organizations that we know they have the competence, or they are skilled in certain hazards, because we wanted to first understand which were the needs, or which were other activities that maybe they were ongoing, let's say, in order to take advantage, but also to make sure that the results that we were obtaining somehow in CLIMAAX will make sense and will be also useful for them. So yeah, I think more or less.
That's really, really interesting. It's amazing because you covered it all. Like, I had a lot of little sub questions I wanted to ask you. I'm very curious about how this works out in practice, because you're describing a very comprehensive process. It sounds like it's relatively recent, and it kind of developed alongside the way we were developing the framework. So it's a good, it's a relief that we're maybe going in the right direction with this guidance. But I have a curiosity, like, what is your experience in working with this broad engagement when you do have an assessment of risk? What is the risk perception? And like, what does it mean in the end to communicate about the risk and the sort of measures that need to be implemented? Because I guess that's one of the hardest stages, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also facts show that. Well, communication, I have to say it's one of our core activities, somehow to say. Besides in these working groups, but I think most of the discussions are going to be more technical. And I think different types of knowledge will enter in, but somehow everything will be kept more in the technical, and there is a common objective, let's say, which are to get some results, and then from there, let's say, define certain actions. So I think because there's like a common goal, somehow I think it maybe is easier, at least maybe that's my perception. But when it comes to risk communication, I mean, in a more broader sense, I think it can get, of course, more complicated. But as I said, by law, citizens, they have the right in the region to know about the risk, and that can affect them, and also which are the actions that they can take in case something is potentially happen or could happen. So we have a specific team here in the Directorate General that takes care of informing like the broad public, let's say, and also activities on to raise awareness on the risk. And there are different, there are different actions, I think, that they well, let's say there's a more broad one, which is in general to just provide information, the one that we know where risk could happen, or which are the, let's say, the frequencies or the possible impacts. And this is, for example, we have in the institution, there's a web portal and there's a map which shows, for example, which are the risk due to flooding, river flooding, for example, or due to it's not really a climatic thing, but due to chemical big industries, for example. And this can be, I mean, it's open and it's publicly available. Anybody can go there. but also, you know, they also have some other activities that I think it's interesting maybe to share for the other regions that maybe listening, which are more targeted, you know, to specific groups. And those campaigns are defined based on the impacts that they had been seen in the past, let's say, and also how other campaigns went. So there's a bit of learning, you know. And for example, in the last year, I know that they were working hard with elderly for heat waves, for example. So I think that's also interesting. And it was a way for them to have, like, they were trying to have campaigns more face-to-face, you know, in a common space. So they will share messages that were relevant to this group of people that they could understand and they could act on their own capacities. So I think this can be.
No, thank you. I mean, this is just so much experience that you're sharing. And I think there's probably some topics people are interested to hear more about the details. So I would maybe just maybe hand over to Jeremy, because we are a little bit limited in the time. But if you have questions for Ainara, please put them in the question and answer. And maybe think also of areas in when we talk about this framework, you see it's a very broad, shall we say, colorful composition of what actually happens in practice, especially when implementing a participatory process and an iterative process. And so you might want to give us feedback and the sort of discussions you'd like to have in future activities of the community of practice. But I hand over to Jeremy. Thanks.
Ainara is quite, I have to say, it's quite encouraging and very nice to see how you engage the stakeholders in the regions. And Michal, you mentioned risk prioritization, and I wanted to sort of dive into that a little bit further. We're curious about the role that the key stakeholder groups played in the prioritization of the key risks in terms of severity and urgency. Could you tell us how your interactions with these groups shaped your CRA, your climate risk assessments, and specifically the prioritization of key risks? And perhaps if you can share some specific actions or examples.
Thank you. When listening to Ainara, I've been
we don't
realizing...
hear you, Michal.
We do.
Oh, okay, my problem.
Is it okay? When listening to Ainara sharing her experience, as we did also in past, I'm always amazed how the system is working in Spain, and I would be happy if we had it similar in Slovakia. And preparing for this discussion also gave me the chance to think more about the stakeholders that we involved in the process. And I have to unfortunately admit that there were not many. Now the question where the civil protection is in Slovakia, well, it is hidden somewhere on the national level, I would say, but the connection to the municipality to me is hidden. And I work with people from the municipal office and other experts who are deeper in the topic, and we didn't find the connection to the civil protection people. So somehow we were working on this topic, well, within the municipality, and me as part of Innovia, which is Innovation Center, helping the public sector and helping to the city of Žilina as well. And we work together with CAIO company that is more on the research side, but very deep in the topic, something like CMCC in the Slovak context, maybe. I mean, in terms of the level of experience and research knowledge. And they were helping us strongly in setting the risks, in guiding us through the knowledge, through the topic, and they were the guidance also for the city. So when I entered the project, basically I was brought in just at the kickoff meeting. I was not at the prior discussions when the cooperation has been set. And I know that at the kickoff we had 4 risks identified that Žilina can enter. out of which we took 2. They were that time called urban flash floods, or now maybe better called heavy rainfall. So something like what happened in Valencia a few days ago. When it comes to Žilina in smaller scale, it can also get some parts of the city paralyzed. So this has been the top and visible risk for us from the beginning, because also for the politicians this is visible. You have a lot of water, you need to rescue something, it costs money and so on. So it's easier to persuade them to do some prevention for the future. And then the second key risk identified have been heat waves, which are rather creepy threat. Creepy in terms that they come quiet, slow, many days, and so on. And from year to year, it's getting harder and harder, but you don't see the big change. So maybe this seems to normal people less urgent. And so these were the two risks that we put to the top. And there were a couple of other risks that we also considered, like for instance, heavy snowfall or blizzards, which now seem to be not actual as we get warmer and we have weaker and weaker winters in this region. But what happens if the Gulf Stream gets weakened? Yeah, it's expected that Europe average temperature will go down. So then maybe the heavy snowfalls will come in the future, who knows? Or droughts are becoming more and more important. Now today, again, nice sunny, dry weather in Žilina. We haven't seen rain for about 3 weeks maybe. So when I was a pupil, I learned about India, how they have rain periods and dry periods. And I thought, well, it's far away, but maybe this is the future for this region as well. So the drought may become also risk key risk for us in the future. So when I come back to the stakeholders, I said about the civil protection that this is not that strong, that visible, but also what I realized, we tried to talk to some other stakeholders, especially people who work with elderly, the schools, hospitals, and I spoke to some people. The problem of our region, and the result was that most of these people didn't care about climate change, because the major problem in our region often is lack of investment, the shortage, and they have harder problems of infrastructure than to think about climate change. So this was a strong learning for me, and I believe that if we don't want to stop at this point, we will need to do some further work in putting the people together and making the community of practice, and maybe assessing the risks again, like in the iterations, as Anna was saying. So basically, I'm not sure if I totally replied to the questions. If any additional, please tell me.
I think that was a very nice compliment, and it's very nice to see how the sort of conceptual aspects that were described at the beginning, they kind of can match onto your thinking and practices. There's a good question, actually, if it's okay, I'll come back to you, Ainara. There's a question from Emese. He's asking if you would share more details about the activities and the tools, like how do you involve vulnerable groups and stakeholders? Do you have anything you might be able to share, for example? Like if you can share also, online material, if that's available.
I mean, maybe specifically for, for vulnerable groups. I mean, I can check, but it will take me a while. But if not, I can always leave it maybe, or I can share it to you, and then you can share it also to the rest of the community. But I know, because that's not exactly my team, it's they are my colleagues. But I know that they have a specific pages from the website so far they only address 2 groups, but they created only for them, and one is for elderly. So they mainly talk about the risks for them and what they can do. I mean, it's very concrete and specific. And the other is for children. And I have to say that the reasoning behind, I think it's very nice. I mean, that's another theme, but I think I would like to share it because I think it's very nice. So at least what we see here in the region is that vulnerability mainly falls in people that that are old because the lack of mobility or difficulties in order to have certain resources, let's say. So for them, those are the most vulnerable, and they see children that they can also be vulnerable, but they see it more as the other side of the coin, more than if we would like to have like a resilient society, let's say, they should focus on them. So that's why they also spend some, let's say, some time in producing material just for them. And I think it's really nice. I mean, I can share something. I will need to ask for it, and then you can share it to the rest. Yeah, of course.
Thanks. No, that's really nice. And I mean, we'll find a means to continue to share information across all of us. So hopefully, you'll find out more about this. I just saw that there's a question also, which is asking more of a technical question. I just want to acknowledge the question and make sure we don't forget it. It's asking about the assessment of risk from drought and whether we have to use only allowed parameters when doing the data analysis and modeling. I would suggest that we wouldn't necessarily talk about allowed parameters, but we would emphasize in the framework and in the implementation of the toolbox that does actually have some workflows assessing drought, that we are more emphasizing the robust use of data sets, looking at the evaluation of underlying uncertainties related to the data that we have available. Obviously, there's both observations and modeling and reanalyses products. And we know that there are multiple indices to assess droughts. And I think it's possible, and if I'm not mistaken, actually in the workflows, there are multiple indices of drought that are calculable. But maybe my colleague Fulvio is also answering the question. Again, I see some action going on. So now I come back. I wanted to ask you back to you, Ainara, again. In this whole cyclical process, I think Michael also mentioned that we see a need to reevaluate and continue to learn and move forward in this assessment process. So the so-called monitoring and evaluation and learning that we describe in the framework. Do you have experience in still thinking about how you involve stakeholders and various the sort of participatory process? How do you involve stakeholders and these priority groups in that stage, like at the end, when you evaluate the process and think about, going into the next iteration in the future, how you might do things differently and so on? I'm curious if you have some experience of that already.
Well, again, there's a lot of legal framework here, but it's the truth. For us, we have to review all those risk plans every 4 years. I mean, that's the minimum. And but also there's the option that it should be done when there are important changes, let's say, in the context, or if there is new information, let's say, that before was not considered. The plan should be reviewed. I mean, it's stated by law. So this is done periodically. I mean, I can say. And then those working groups, let's say somehow they already exist, so they are called again and they produce, they check and they review everything that was there. So this is like the most formal, system that we have nowadays. But of course, it's also not perfect because still we, and that was our idea when we decided to engage in CLIMAAX, is because we would like to have like a deeper understanding of how hazards and risk will evolve due to climate change. because we have all those plans, but we consider current conditions. We don't really have projections. So our idea was to also engage in CLIMAAX in order to get these new insights to guide funding and to start dialogues, because as I said, we work through working groups. So this is, we really need to have figures and results, and not only to update and reinforce the plans and procedures that we have, but also, there are many actors in the same table, so we need to discuss certain results. So this happens, let's say, inside those working groups, at least for the planning. But maybe coming back to what was mentioned before on the stakeholders, on the vulnerable groups, our idea was also through CLIMAAX or projects like CLIMAAX to get information on how the risks that we already consider, how they will evolve, and also to share that information through this let's say the channels that we already have. So we had in mind these two. So we hope we will get some results. I mean, we already have been working with many partners, so, and we can start all this process again.
Thanks, Ainara. Over to Jeremy. We just have a few minutes left in our discussion, which we could go on further, but here we are.
Ainara and Michal, it's really been a great pleasure having you share your climate risk assessment experiences as part of our discussion today. But before we close, we'd like you to share a few final thoughts or tips that you'd like to emphasize, or maybe what you already said, or maybe what you didn't say, that our regions and communities just starting out in climate risk assessments can sort of benefit from. So maybe you could share what you would have liked to have known before you performed your climate risk assessments. And also, are there any areas that you could have benefited from more guidance or collaboration, knowledge sharing, training, partnerships, etc.? Maybe we'll start with you, Michal, and then over to you, Ainara, afterwards.
Okay, so the question about what could we do differently if we were at the beginning? I would say one thing. The topic of the stakeholders looks to me quite important at this moment. Although probably the process would have been similar to what happened. However, having more partners, more people for discussion on this topic, we would feel stronger support and stronger foundation for this work. And another advice for the other regions, it's to ensure good technical support, and we had this through our partner CAIO company. So we could have profited from this strongly. So that's very good. And for next for the future, I think sharing not only the practices on the climate risk assessment can be beneficial, but also I see cultural similarities and differences, because Spain has got different history than the Central European region has history, and we also have other difficulties, not only in the infrastructure, what I already mentioned, but I would say also leadership. That there is brain drain, and the people who are in the public administration, they are learning to do the governance better, which is very good, but there is still a way to get to the level of Catalonia in terms of civil protection and having the groups and the participation of public in the questions. So maybe if we take this into account in the whole process, the cultural similarities and differences, maybe this will help us to understand some specifics of the regions and to tailor the results even better.
Thank you. Over to you, Ainara.
Well, I also agree with Michal that I think it's very important to engage early with technical and sectoral organizations that they have specific skills that you will need throughout like the different steps, especially in the ones where you have to make some technical decisions, because you know, we can have those working groups you know, in place, but you know, it's easy that there will be new studies or you know, new data, so, and also new approaches. So there are certain decisions that you have to make in different steps that are, I think, they are key. So sometimes, at least from our experience, as Michael said, it's key to have some support in the most technical side. I also agree that it's really interesting what Michael said about the culture. So we will also think that it would be nice also for us, you know, to see how other regions are doing and how they have you know, the challenges they have, and also how they overcome some of them that we still have. Let's say we have some limitations. And then maybe just a short recommendation, but it was expressed at the beginning of the call, that it was the idea that the process is iterative. I think, you know, we usually we would like to have everything which is straightforward and linear, but it seems it doesn't happen. So we have to come back many times, and sometimes I think it can be difficult for the members of these working groups, because it's also tiring, no? Like it can be. So I think it's good to have this this in mind, because it may happen that you will need to redefine certain things or rediscuss certain things, and yeah, maybe sometimes we try to be flexible, but maybe we are not as flexible as we think we are. But yeah, I think I will insist on that.
Thank you very much, both Michael and Ainara. I mean, we saw, I think, very clearly the rich diversity, both of experiences, but also the reality of implementing these processes in very different contexts. But then there were commonalities that you were mentioning kind of spontaneously. And when we think back to all the participants in this call, it's really wonderful to see we have a very broad coverage of European contexts. So hopefully you heard some issues that are very familiar to you, or you heard some things which you hadn't thought of before. And I think I would say that the framework does effectively provide a good backdrop for this conversation, and it provides a sort of a compass and a steering point where we can kind of converge and have more focused conversations. And so I hand over to Gloria. We're going to ask more feedback from you all who are on the call. And if you have some ideas now that you've had this discussion, feel free to start, you know, sending them back to us, and we can really listen to what you're thinking, what you would find interesting. We could have gone into so much detail, I think, on many topics here. So it really shows the value of this kind of community discussion and community of practice and cultural exchange as well. I thought it was really nice, Michael, that you emphasized the cultural dimension. Thanks. Back to you, Gloria.
Thank you, Anna, and thanks everyone, like moderators and panelists, for this interactive discussion. It was great also to see questions from the audience. We tried to answer mixed with some typing answers from the back office and also live. But feel free to reach out to us if you have further inquiries. We are really aiming to build a COP that is interactive and not top down. So without, like, I would like to ask you again one last time, some inputs of what to do next. So we have some ideas, Fulvio already mentioned them before, of future activities, but we would really like to tailor them in a way that they are most useful for you. So I would like to ask you 3 topics on which we should focus the upcoming activities. You can again access the Menti with a QR code or going to climate.menti and enter the code that you see on the top of the slide. So we and if you have also other topics that you would like to for us to dedicate and to focus on in next activities, feel free to insert them in the Q&A box. So we will gather and all the inputs and understand where to focus next. So if you have other ideas that we didn't include them here, let us know. We're curious and interested and open. So we can see for now that the majority of people is interested in the practical application of CRA tools and methodology. So regarding this, I already anticipated, and Fulvio already mentioned there will be a webinar on the handbook of the CLIMAAX project, I believe, in November 23rd. If you check the LinkedIn page of the CLIMAAX project, you will see the event. Feel free to register. And also, there is a lot of interest for stakeholder engagement and participatory practices. So that's good. We will then try to focus and bring you some content on these. So thank you all for letting us know. And last question, what type of content should be most valuable to you? So are you interested in case studies and success stories? Do you want to participate in hands-on training with the CRA tools? Are you interested in expert-led Q&A sessions or peer-to-peer learnings and discussions? So again, we're interested in knowing what you want, what is most valuable to you. And again, so as I mentioned before, like this event is not linked with the open calls, but we are really trying to build a community that leverages and foster community collective knowledge and share context in order for then regions to work together potentially on and learn better about climate risk assessment. So even though like the fundings, like the calls of the CLIMAAX, they provide funding opportunities or financial resources, all the toolbox, like the CLIMAAX resources, such as the toolbox, the framework, and the handbook explaining and guiding you through the toolbox are available online publicly. So it seems that most of the people are interested in hands-on training with the CRA tools. So good to know, some workshop hands-on. So we will try to develop these. So stay tuned. Thank you again for giving your feedback. And yeah, so closing this event, I would just leave you with the message of how to engage and how to stay active in this community of practice. So first, we have a LinkedIn group. At some point we shared the link. We will share it also again now in the chat. Join and feel free to connect and post there. We started it recently, so we are now still populating it, but we hope that it will be soon populated with practitioners and professionals on climate risk assessment. So you're more than welcome, highly invited to participate to our survey. So even though the framework has been already published and is developed, is still, let's say, a living document. So we are still trying to collect information of how is the climate risk assessment conducted throughout Europe. So it would be really invaluable to us if you could take some of your time. It should be around 20 minutes to answer the questions we provide, we are asking in this survey. And so this should help us also to understand how to better support regions throughout Europe in these on climate risk assessment. Finally, but not least, you can directly subscribe to the community of practice to receive communication and further updates. So you can find it in the CLIMAAX website under Participate Community of Practice. And if you scroll down, you have the description, the outcomes and expectation, and you have a register button, and we will collect your email. So every time we send out information, material, content, and invitations to future activities, you will be connected. So thank you again. We're still, again, we have just launched this second phase, this expanded community of practice. So thanks for providing feedback, and we will try to do our best to expand and create a place to share knowledge that best follows your need. And thank you again for everyone who participated, for the panelists, for the speakers, project coordinators, and we look forward to future activities. And stay tuned. I wish you, we are closing a couple of minutes in advance. I think nobody's sad about it, and thank you. Have a good rest of the day.
Bye, thank you.